So Simon Nunn, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for your time. Executive Director of Member Services at National Housing Federation. Welcome to the Academy. First question, what is the National Housing Federation?
Well, we're the trade body for housing associations. So our job is to lobby on behalf of housing associations, but also to campaign for more and better social housing.
So how does the NHF work? What are your structures? Where does your money come from? How does it all come together?
Most of our money comes from member affiliation. So individual housing associations pay an affiliation fee. If you're a gigantic housing association like Clarion, then obviously you pay a big fee. For a smaller housing association, then it's much smaller, but we also generate our own commercial income through conferences and events, and also through partnerships with some private sector organisations.
So you do lots of different things that we'll get into, but I think the thing you're best known for is influencing government policy on a national level. Can you give us an example, perhaps, of where you've done that recently and what it kind of looks like?
Yeah, I mean, recently the government has introduced some legislation called the Levelling Up Bill, or the Regeneration and Levelling Up Bill, and this is about changing the planning rules. At the moment in planning, there's something called Section 106, which means if a private developer is building a new development, a proportion of that should be affordable homes. Well, the government have decided to abolish that and bring in a new system called the Community Infrastructure Levy, where the developer will now pay a levy which then can be deployed on affordable homes. We were really concerned, a lot of people were concerned this would mean a reduction in the number of affordable homes. We've successfully lobbied for the government to change the legislation to ask local authorities to ensure that there's no reduction in affordable homes as a result of this legislation, which we were really pleased with.
And how do you actually do that? So it's about lobbying MPs, it's about trying to get in front of ministers. How do you do it in a very practical sense?
Yeah, I mean, there are two ways that we can make the case for affordable housing. One is very much in the media and trying to engender a debate out there amongst the public and in the media about the need for affordable homes, and explaining some of the challenges that there are out there at the moment in terms of what the consequences are of not building enough affordable homes. And that ranges from the obvious one, like high levels of street homelessness, but also to families in temporary accommodation, sofa surfing, young people not being able to move out, not being able to afford their homes. So that whole range of issues. And the other way we influence government is by making sure that ministers and members of parliament properly understand the issues. So we will produce briefings for them, both written briefings and in-person briefings, and make sure that the perspectives of our members are reflected in some of those debates in Parliament as well.
So that's the kind of example that everyone can get behind, building more affordable homes on private-led developments. But there must be cases where, you've got such a vast membership, nearly all housing associations in England. Sometimes, you've got Clarion, 120,000 units. Do they sometimes have very different opinions to, I don't know, like we were talking earlier about Innisfree, like a small housing association, North West London, kind of 500 odd homes. They must have competing interests sometimes. How do you balance that?
Well, it depends. I don't think their interests compete. What we do is we segment our membership. So we have very specific groups for our smaller members and for our specialist members who provide supported housing and specialist care. And we make sure that the service we provide and the lobbying is very much tailored to their needs. Rural housing is another really good example. We have a very active group of rural members who have particular issues that might be different from a large organisation in London, for example. So I don't think that different housing associations' interests oppose each other, but different housing associations do have different interests that we need to cater to.
I was going to ask particularly, the housing market in the UK is almost split into London and the South East and the rest. Is the same true of your members in that regard?
Yeah, that's right. The challenges in London are different. Overall, housing associations are all facing kind of similar challenges, which is the need to invest in their current stock. You'll find that larger housing associations, particularly those ones in London, a lot of their challenges are going to be about the need to invest in their stock because of new building safety regulations, for example. So they are different. And also we have, actually it's about high value, low value markets. I mean, that's the kind of fundamental difference. And as our members are always reminding us, you have high value, wealthy areas in the north, and equally you have areas of social deprivation, particularly coastal towns, for example, kind of in the south, and that tends to be where priorities might be slightly different, because it's easier to build new homes where homes are valuable, because housing associations can sell shared ownership or market homes, and that will cross-subsidise affordable home delivery.
Yeah. So the NHF, you also do a lot of other things beyond just lobbying. You do policy briefings for your members, you run events as well. Could you just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things our members tell us every year, that one of the things they really value about the NHF is them being able to access resources and information. So our policy team will regularly brief housing associations on changes in legislation. Just recently there's been a lot of change in building safety regulations, so we'll brief our members on that and signpost them to the right places. There's a lot of new regulation in social housing, for example, so again we will hold webinars with our members, we have networks, and we have much larger sort of commercial events where members will pay to attend, but again they'll discuss kind of these issues. So it's a whole range of different ways we share information and communicate.
So your annual conference is the stuff of legend and is coming up soon. I think it's September every year normally that you have it. Tell us a bit about the conference, because it's a real coming together, not just for your members but for the whole housing sector, really. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, our annual summit has had a reputation as being the event that kind of sets the tone for the sector. It's where housing association, in particular, our summit is targeted at housing association leaders, but it's about where they check in, get a sense of where they are. They hear from the politicians, which is sometimes less popular than other kind of inputs. But it's about checking in, getting a sense of where the sector is, getting inspired, getting challenged, and hearing from other housing associations, importantly, and kind of swapping notes. We've had the Prime Minister speak at our annual summit. We've had Secretaries of State announcing really important new policy initiatives at our summit. So big sort of political event in the calendar, really.
And looking forward to the year ahead, what do you think is coming down the road for housing associations? What are you and the NHF particularly looking out for?
What we're calling for is a long-term plan for the delivery of affordable housing. As I'm sure you're aware, Dave, there have been a lot of housing ministers in the past few years. There's always a big commentary about that, and I think that is very much indicative of the fact that governments have tended to take a short-term view of housing rather than a longer-term view of housing. So that is our key call, and we will be asking all the main political parties to sign up to that and hopefully get some cross-party consensus that what this country really needs is a long-term plan to deliver the housing we need.
Is it fair to say, though, that a long-term plan has been a long-term call? We've been calling this for several parliaments now, and it hasn't materialised in terms of public policy.
No, that's right, but I think it's really important to keep reminding everybody that that is what we need. I think there's a general view kind of out there that we do suffer from short-termism in politics, particularly where I think recently politics has got particularly polarised. Both main political parties and indeed the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, they all say they are committed to affordable housing and the delivery of more affordable housing. So, if that's true, let's get them all to commit to a proper long-term plan to deliver that.
So, in July this year, the Social Housing Act received its royal assent and became law. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because that was a really important moment for housing associations.
Yeah, so housing associations are regulated, which means that there is a government regulator that oversees the work that they do. And at the moment, social housing is regulated for financial viability, sort of financial reasons. So it's to make sure that housing associations are sustainable financially. In 2010, when the Conservatives first came into power, and it was austerity, and they got rid of lots of government departments. One thing that they did get rid of was the Tenant Services Authority. So that was a regulatory body that actually held housing associations to account on the services that they provide to their tenants, called consumer regulation. And effectively what this new bill does is put back that consumer regulation. So housing associations not only accountable to the regulator on their business plans and their financial sustainability, they're now also accountable to the regulator for the quality of the services that they provide to their tenants, which is a good thing. At the NHF, we didn't agree with the abolition of the consumer regulation in the first place, and we're supportive of the government putting in a decent framework of consumer regulation this time.
And so just finally, Simon, what would you say to people, whether they're residents who just want to get more involved in their housing association or staff who work in the sector, how should they go about getting involved in the NHF?
Well, when it comes to staff who work for housing associations, depending on what their specialism is, they could be housing officers, but they could work in finance, they could work in all sorts of areas, then they should go onto the NHF website and see whether there are any networks or particularly any webinars or events that are relevant to what they do. When it comes to residents, I think if tenants get involved in housing associations, and I know it's certainly the case at Eastlight, it doesn't just mean you can influence the way the service is provided to you by a landlord, but it actually means you can potentially change and influence things in your community and make your community a better place, which is great.
Simon Nunn, Executive Director for Member Services at National Housing Federation, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Dave.